Hello everyone, it's Kari from sunshineinmypocket.com. I'm back here with another project to share, this time using a stamp set I have never used before. This is the stamp set from Missing Stamps called In the Dark, and it's a smaller stamp set. I thought it would be great with this new rattan stencil from Missing Stamps. When I saw this stencil, I immediately thought of a chair, so it brought me to the stamp set. And then I added the Tea Party stamp set with Alice sitting in the chair. So instead of using that empty chair right there, I thought I would use the Alice in the chair. And we're going to create kind of a moonlit background with the moon behind Alice. And I hope you'll stay tuned because not only is this a really fun card to create, but I also have some really exciting news to share with you. And I have been given permission to share, so I will give you a little hint at the end or closer to the end of the video. But let's get started on this project real quick. First, I have a circle mask here that I've used to mask off the background of this panel, and we're using an A2 size panel, so it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm going to start by inking on some Distress Oxides in blue colors. I've got the Stormy Sky Distress Oxide right here, and I'm going to also bring in the Prize Ribbon Distress Oxide to darken it up just a bit. And after I do that, I will add the rattan stencil over the top. And that's going to create the beautiful texture in the background. Has that feeling of a chair. I feel like it does. I'm going to use Uncharted Mariner in this one, so it's a little bit darker. It will create that texture that I'm really looking for. Now, in hindsight, I almost wish I would have done the background even darker. I do like how it turned out, but it could have been darker. Now, this is not necessarily a Halloween card per se, but you could use this technique with the moon in the background with any of your Halloween images as well, and it would create a really cool look. Today I could not resist making an Alice card, and I do have a secret to share. If I could just sit and make Alice cards all the time, I might do that because that's how much I love the Alice collection from Missing Stamps. It's one of my favorites. I don't think that's much of a secret, actually. So now that I've got that portion done with the background, I'm going to bring in some Scattered Straw Distress Oxide to color up that moon just a little bit. Not too much, but just give it a little color. And I did get some adhesive stuck to the back there, so I'm using my adhesive eraser to remove that. And then we'll go ahead and ink that up. And then I'm going to bring in an even darker shade of ink. Now, I had a happy accident happen right here. This is the Pumice Stone Distress Oxide, and I brought in a little small blending brush, but I thought this blending brush was clean and it still had some red color to it, or pink. I'm not sure what color I used on this. Now, normally I reserve a color of ink for each blending brush, but this time for this small one, apparently I had used it on a darker color. But it's okay because I really do like how it turned out in the end. It added that shadow to the moon that really adds a fun, spooky, eerie touch and gives you that night glow. So it worked out in my favor, thankfully. So if that ever happens to you, just go with it and see how it turns out. But look at that giant moon now. And now I'm going to go ahead and use that sentiment from the stamp set. It says, "When you can't look on the bright side, I will sit with you in the dark." I love that sentiment. I think it's so kind and gracious. And the image that I'm using has Alice holding a cupcake. So I will sit with you in the dark and bring cupcakes even. It's taking it to the next level, right? I'm just going to stamp this on with some black VersaFine Onyx black ink, and I'll heat set that with some clear embossing powder. That'll make sure that it doesn't smear, and it will give it a little bit of a raised texture as well. I am going to stamp this a number of times to get a nice dark impression, and now I'll go ahead and add that clear embossing powder and then heat set that over the top. Now I wanted to mention that I have already made quite a few Alice cards, and if you look in the YouTube playlist, you'll find an Alice collection there where you can watch all of them. There's been quite a few. I've made some shaker cards, one with flock, quite a few scene cards. They're really fun to make. Lots of them also use some stencils. There's a lot of different techniques that I've shared with some Alice cards in the past, so you might want to go check that out. Okay, back to the card for a minute. I placed that stencil back over the circle stencil mask back over the top because I wanted to add some dark blue ink designs to the background of this card. And so I'm testing it out here using my paintbrush and some Distress Oxide ink. And when that dried, it dried similar to the color I already had in the background. So I decided to bring in some more splatters and some different options to hopefully keep a nice design going. Here I have some Winter Frost mica stain or mica spray. And so I used a little bit of that. That did add some really fun shine to the background. And I still wanted even more. So I brought in the Prize Ribbon Distress Spray Stain and added even more. I also added some gold splatters. So it just really created a fun background look. Lots of design there. Lots to look at. So fun to do and a little bit messy. If you don't want those spray stains and paint all over your work surface, it's a good idea to bring in your splat box. But I thought I could be a little cleaner. So let's get on to the coloring with Alice. This is a fun one to color because the moonlight is coming from behind her. It's going to create a yellow glow to the sides, and then the front of her is going to be even darker shades because she'll be sitting kind of in the dark with just that moon glow around the edge. So I'm starting out with some yellows in the spots where I thought that moon would be shining around her. And I do wish I would have created more yellow on those areas because after I got done coloring, it tended to kind of swallow up that yellow. There's still a little bit, you'll be able to see a little bit, but in the end, I really do wish that I had a brighter yellow glow around the edge. So keep that in mind if you're going to color an image like this with that moon in the background. Kind of overemphasize the yellow portion at first and do more than you think so you don't completely cover over all of it. I love how it turned out. I do wish there was more of a glow, but you can still see it, especially in her skirt. So you'll notice in the end. For the chair, I used some E30 shades, and then for the background, I'm going to bring in some purple because I love these shades of purple together. I start with a light shade of gray because that's going to give it the darker moonlight look to it. Instead of just being the true color, it's going to have a gray undertone to it all. I used this N0 all over, including the back of the chair, her hair, her dress, all the things. And now I'll bring in those purple shades and I'm going to color the background of the chair in purple, and then I'm going to add some stripes to it just for a little more interest and variation. So I have the colors up here on the screen. In case you can't read those though, it's V06, then V04. Then I'm bringing in the V15 to add the stripes. Next, let's move on to her dress. I'm going to use some shades of gray for this dress to give her a little black dress. I don't think I've ever colored Alice up with a black dress before, so this was kind of fun to do, but I still left some of those shadows and highlights to the dress as well. And I colored up her apron with grays because I thought that if it was white, it would still look gray in a darker moonlit night. So I'll finish coloring up the dress off screen. You can see I've already colored her tights and her shoes. Her shoes are purple. I think Alice would probably like the color purple. What do you think? And then I'm going to finish up the rest of her, including her hair off screen. But I did want to show you the coloring of her face. I I definitely colored her darker than I normally would, leaving lightness around the edges of her face for that glow. And then I just kept making a little bit darker because she is, after all, sitting in the dark. So after I colored the first layer, I ended up going in with darker shades, and then I brought some yellow in for the outside of her face. I think it looks really cool. I wish you could see it a little better here. I did get as close as I could to show you this. So there we go. There's her gray apron. And after I finished coloring her, I just fussy cut her out so that I could pop her up on that background. Now you will notice when I fussy cut her out, there are some white spaces down in between the chair there. And so I'm using a darker shade of Copics to make that look like the background without having to cut all of that out. I just don't think I could have cut that out very well with an X-Acto knife. So the next best thing is to color it in to match the background. I may have colored it a little too dark here, but it looks great in the end. It will lighten up just a bit when it dries as well. Now I'm going to pop that up with some foam tape. And there is our Alice sitting in the dark, but we're not done yet because I realized something really cool. Last time I used this particular die, which is the Oh Happy Day frame die. There are a couple of little die cuts that look like weeds. They almost look like weeds, like little dandelions, like Make-A-Wish, but also weeds like you're in the weeds. And they work perfectly for this card. So I cut a couple out with some dark blue cardstock, and then I'm placing those using some tweezers because these are very thin, fine dies. And I'm using the tweezers to add the glue and then attach those to the front of the card. I also cut some out in white and then colored them up with a dark blue Copic marker just to give some variation in those weeds. And you'll see that in just a minute. I will color those up and then add those to the card as well, just to give a few more little florals, or in this case, weeds, which I think really does create kind of an interesting scene in my mind, because sometimes when you get kind of stuck in the weeds or you're out in the weeds, you need someone to listen to you, don't you think? Alice is probably a good listener. She's eating those cupcakes. So I'll finish that off and then add it to a top folding card base. And while I do so, let me tell you the exciting news. I cannot keep it to myself anymore. I did get permission to share this, by the way, and that is that Missing Stamps has a new set of Alice collection coming out at the end of this month. That's right, really soon, in September, end of September, and there's a whole new set of Alice. Now, I will be sharing some sneak peeks real soon and some new videos on the Alice collection and the brand new portion to share. So stay tuned for that. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this a thumbs up. And we'll see you real soon with more Alice. Bye-bye.